Chapter 6 The Good Morning. I truly loved my mom, and she was scary as hell. I can remember distinctly being about 13 years old when I started my period. I remember this time because of the smell. When a woman of any age has her period, bathing or showering becomes a really huge deal because menstruation, although completely natural and wonderful, does have an odor. In Sally's house, there was a real issue with bathing for some reason. I was beginning seventh grade in the latter half of 1976. It was the 200-year anniversary of the USA, and at our school it was a big deal. I had started my period that summer, and I became really sensitive about being clean. Unfortunately, my need to have a shower or a bath every day before school was completely at odds with Sally's weird obsession with linking the need to bathe every day with evil, vanity, trying to seduce her 19-year-old boyfriend, or some kind of religious wrongdoing. For a long time, there was no shower in our house at all, just a big old clawfoot bathtub, which we were not allowed to use freely. Don't parents usually have to fight their kids to get in the bathtub? In our house, it was mostly off limits. The baths I do remember taking were far and few between until I got to be around 15 or 16 and insisted on a bath at least once a week. Prior to that time, bathing and self-care in general were activities to be done on the sly. I was about 11 or so when my militant ability to wake up quietly 10 minutes before the alarm went off each morning came into play. I would grab the Radio Shack alarm clock with both hands, gently turning off the switch that would blare the alarm, and gingerly place the clock back on the piece of cloth upon which it sat, all while keeping so silent that even my sheets did not rustle. This skill was honed to a precise number of movements, which had the grace and silence of a ballet. On the rare occasion that I would accidentally set the thing off, I would wrap it quickly in a blanket until I could get it to shut down. Waking Sally up in the morning before school was a very, very risky and frankly terrifying proposition. Sally was not a great morning person, which is funny considering that both my sister and I grew up to be sunny, happy morning people. I had started this hyper-vigilant wake-up routine in the 5th grade when I figured out that it was best and much safer if you simply woke up, got ready for school, and left the building without waking Mom up. As I said, Sally was not good in the morning. I have since realized that those first morning hours between waking and leaving the house were the hardest for her because I believe that any self-medication that had been administered the evening before, that is alcohol, weed, crank, would have worn off in the early morning, leaving her raw, emotional, and on edge. As a kid, however, I did not know that. I simply knew that I would need to get myself and my sister out of that gauntlet of a house without waking Mom up. To wake her up meant a complete crapshoot of crazy, scary, burn the house down mental illness, which could become an all-destroying fire on any given day. I had learned this very early. I would say by 6 or 7 years old, probably. Whatever mental illness that plagued our mother came with a healthy dose of paranoia, and the need to look for issues like lying and other wrongdoing, even when they were not truly present. She was convinced from a very early age, in my case particularly, that I was always plotting against her in some way. My one and only directive when I was a child was to survive her. Literally, that was it. These outbursts would often, and did often, devolve into being emotionally and verbally abused until you were ready to admit or even make up an incident of wrongdoing so that you could escape her wrath. Once you confessed to the imagined deed, you were expected to hug it out and feel better for admitting your sins. The problem with all of that is that it was such a full frontal mind screw for a kid of any age. Having to go through the admitting, begging for forgiveness, hugging it out for an event that was totally made up in her mind was just crazy and terrifying. It was terrifying, and it was exhausting. And it was too much for any child to carry, really. All of this screaming, crying, interrogation about imagined wrongdoings, accompanied by insane rants, laughing, Bible-hugging, breakdowns, and threatening, could happen for as much as an hour in the early morning hours before school, if you woke her up. Once this happened, you would have to go through it. Hopefully, get out of the house and then try to seem as if everything was just fine by the time you got to the bus stop. Our house was 200 years old and was one big creaking hulk. If you ever lived in a very old home, I mean to say that every door, floor, wall, window, and surface creaked like an old boat hull when you moved around in any or all directions. I mean, it was noisy. Added to that was my mother's need to add bells to the door handles of every door in the house. The front door had brass bells hanging from it. The door between the living room and the tiny steep stairwell to the bedrooms upstairs had bells on it. And the door to the upstairs literally creaked like a barn door when you opened and closed it to pass through. That door also always had to be tied closed and tied shut so that the bedroom cat would not escape from our mother's room. Because of that cat, there was also a kind of rope which needed to be tied when going in or out of that door. Writing about this now, reading it out loud, makes it all seem even crazier and just confusing. The most important detail in getting downstairs and out of that house without waking Sally up was the art of picking out all of your clothes the night before. I would insist that my sister had her clothes picked out as well. Stephanie is 4 years younger than me, and it was much harder to get her out of that bedroom, down the stairs, and ready to go than if it had been just me. It was imperative that both of us had picked out socks, undies, shirt, pants, sweater, whatever we would be wearing. They had to be neatly folded into piles on the dresser. The idea was that no drawer, closet, or basket needed to be moved, touched, or rummaged through to find what we were going to wear. All of these activities would create noise, movement, and might wake Sally, or worse, her bedroom cat, which would dig at the door if it heard us, thereby waking her up. Our room was always a filthy wreck, with clothes on the floor and everywhere else. This fact actually worked in our favor because at least walking in ankle-deep clothing was quieter. Our room had a door which opened onto a 2-by-2-foot landing at the top of a very steep and narrow staircase. Sally's bedroom door was on the other side of that 2-by-2 landing. Once the alarm was turned off, I would quietly sit up in my bed, wake my sister with a finger to my lips in the shh sign. She would wake up like a well-trained little soldier. I would hand grab our clothes bundles, again with a finger to my lips, and send her toward our bedroom door. Our door, for whatever reason, would not creak very loudly if you just swung it hard and smoothly toward your body. I would swing it open just enough so that we could both pass through onto that 2-by-2 landing. Stephanie knew that she needed to be soft and quick on the stairs in order to avoid making them heave and creak with noise. I was just a bit too heavy and would often step directly from our bedroom door threshold down onto the first stair step in order to avoid the landing. That landing would creak loudly with my body weight, so I avoided it. Once we got to the bottom of the stairs, the door between the living room and hall needed to be opened. It had, however, as I said, bells on it, so I would hold the bells in my right hand, Steph would untie the rope and swing the door open enough for us to get through. I would then retie the rope or ribbon or whatever was holding it shut. Getting out of our house always felt like getting out of some crazy, scary carnival box to me. I think that is why now, in my own home, I can't stand closed doors or blinds drawn or locked spaces. Once we were safely downstairs, we would still remain very quiet. I would often wet or wash my hair in the tub because it was too risky to try to bathe fully. If Mom woke up and found that I was washing my hair or taking a bath, she would devolve into a raging meltdown of, "Oh, the sin, the vanity," usually followed by, "Who do you think you are, you dirty little bitch," kind of craziness. Stephanie was also not allowed to bathe enough. For the life of me, I still have not been able to ferret out just what was the bathing issue. Cereal would be quietly poured into bowls. I figured out how to pour cereal onto my hand while it lay against the bowl so that no cereal sounds were created. It would just roll into my palm and not make any noise on the transfer to the bowl. Being that our house was a pre-Civil War building, it had many nooks and crannies. One of these nooks was a strange cutout hole in the wall between a pantry room and the stairwell just below our mother's bedroom door on the other side. What this meant was that anything we did in the kitchen or bathroom to get ready for school in the way of sound waves could travel up through that nook in the wall. If we were too loud in any way, bowl clinking in the sink, bathroom door shut a bit too hard, refrigerator door let swing to close on its own without a guiding, softening hand, it could wake her up. The only great thing about that nook in the wall was that if Sally decided that she had heard something, something that would let her know that we had not left yet, she would get up, untie the ribbons that held her door shut from the inside, fight with the bedroom cat a bit so it couldn't get out, swing that creaking bedroom door wide, and hit that loud stairwell. We would hear all of this clearly and have approximately 4 minutes and 17 seconds to get out of that house before she could get down the steep stairwell, through the hall door, and out into the kitchen. That weird little pantry wall nook was our savior and our ruin on many occasions. Our successful morning program was pretty much the same on school days. Get dressed, either on our beds or downstairs, bathroom, silent cereal, coats, hats, snowsuits, depending on the season. On a day when we had not woken Mom up, we would approach the front door to the porch to exit. This door again was old and super creaky, and on top of that it had a literal bundle of old brass bells hanging off of it. I still have this bundle of antique brass bells in my home. Until recently, I actually had the very same bells on my front door. I finally figured out that having those bells on my door is somewhat of a Stockholm Syndrome thing. I have since taken them all down. The front door was better actually because even though there were more bells, they were much heavier, so that if I really slowly and smoothly opened the door, I could do it without any bells moving. I would open the door enough for us to get out, close it quietly, and we would quickly, very purposefully and silently, hurry off the porch and out onto School Street. I can still remember that every day that we had successfully moved out onto School Street without waking Mom up was so incredibly liberating. The feeling of having gotten through the morning without her interaction was like a snake of terror unfurling from your stomach and moving away across the road to terrorize someone else. The problem with Sally was that due to her undiagnosed psychiatric issues and alcoholism, she was totally free to terrorize and love us any way that she deemed correct. It was only much later that I would understand how completely warlike this morning scenario was. Now, if we were fed and close to departure and heard movement of any kind from upstairs, we would, in a kind of silent, the house is on fire panic, coat up and get out the front door without being quiet. The winter was the worst. We could not leave and walk to school and or the bus stop without mittens, hats, snowsuits, snow pants, boots, etc. Snow gear added its own noise hazard. Between the years of 1960 and 1990, snow gear was made of what I can only deem the noisiest blend of polyester ever known to man. The zippers, the snaps, the hoods, the whole friggin' deal was noisy. Then once it was on, every arm and leg rubbed together like a hellacious buzzsaw, and when you tried to move at all. Not the best gear for moving out of your building like a ninja trying to get off the field of battle. If we could get off the porch and up past Canal Street to the Forley Blue clothing shop without looking back, we could feign the idea that even if Sally was yelling at us from the front porch to come back, we didn't hear her. I cannot even count the number of times that the flight up the street happened with the opening creak of that bedroom door. I think at some point when I was around 15 and Steph was maybe 11 and a half, Sally started to really get wind of our silent morning ritual because if she woke up, she would start yelling our names from the stair landing instead of all the way down the stairs first. The real issue with Sally and the school morning was that you absolutely never knew what kind of an experience it was going to be. I believe that about 70% of her mornings were bad experiences, at least prior to Nelson's arrival in our home when I was about 14. After Nelson moved in and they got married, Sally for sure was a bit more reined in. Thank you, Nelson, for that. I truly believe that Nelson's arrival in our lives saved my sister's high school years. So prior to Nelson's arrival, I'm going to give Sally a 70% horror show of a morning ritual. The real mind crusher about her morning mental illness were that every once in a while she would catch us completely unaware, wake up happy, making pancakes, smiling, and hugs goodbye at the door. This was particularly mind screwy, however, because it was so far and few between that you knew in your goddamn bones that you were going to have to pay for it sometime later. At a later time, when your guard was down, she was going to come at you with the force of a full-blown psycho, and this soft, kind person making you pancakes would be the most terrifying human you had ever stood before. This was Mom. Looking back on the scenario now, it occurs to me that this kind of experience as a child really makes you grow up in a very black and white way. I can remember being very young and knowing that the way our life was set up was not right. There was no safety in it. There was no soft, safe, secure place for us. I was very young, maybe 6 or 7, when I became fully aware that this woman was not right mentally. I obviously didn't put any kind of real name on it, but I knew that even as a kid, I was more capable of getting ready for school and getting Steph ready for school in some way that was not traumatic to either of us. I knew that the crazy was not normal. Arolam tells me now that all of the childhood trauma was a facilitator for a kind of evolution that might otherwise have taken much longer. I don't buy into the "you must suffer for growth" mantra, and neither does Arolam. But certainly I was at 11 years old thinking like an adult trying to survive. Survival was the rule of thumb. I just wanted to survive it. I wanted Steph to survive it. Thus, the ninja morning routine. To this day, both my sister and I are militantly happy morning people. My son refers to me as being the only human other than his aunt who has the morning dirt bike syndrome. If you're not familiar with this term, it means that I wake up very cheerful and ready to head off into the woods at a high rate of speed, bantering the whole time about how great the day is going to be. Thus, the dirt bike sound, ba, 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 like a dirt bike rider shifting quickly through gears and happily speeding away into the morning sun. I would fight this description, except that I have often seen it in my sister Stephanie, and truth be told, I do have it myself. Arolam is telling me that this is a great time to bring up the subject of choice. Arolam always tells me that there is a place for making choices in every second of your day. No matter where you are at or what you're going through, no matter how fucked things may seem, you can always choose. Arolam just wanted me to tell you that I used the word fucked, not him. No matter what your earthly circumstances are, you can make a choice about how you will adapt in situations or be run over within them. It is that simple. You adapt and you choose your reaction to any situation, or you refuse to adapt and you choose victimhood. I have often complained to Arolam that this rule seems a bit hard, and he assures me that it is the truth. No matter what is going on in any second of your day, you always have the option of adapting and choosing how you will react to that situation. In that way, you actually retain ultimate power over your own soul's experience. Our morning routine, although I did not realize it at the time, was a perfect example of this rule. Although just kids, we chose to adapt to an untenable situation by coming up with a way to completely avoid that situation. We adapted and determined to have a reaction that was safer and more conducive to not being targeted by terrifying craziness in the morning. Stephanie and I took it one step further, which was to look at the adaptation as adults and decide to be super annoyingly happy and positive with our loved ones in the morning. Thus, the morning dirt bike. We learned from our mother how not to be. The takeaway here is that you are in total control of how you feel and react to difficult situations in your life. As a soul, you always have the choice to adapt and react in any way you see fit. Not to be cliche, but you actually can take crappy situations and decide how to adapt and react in a positive way that ultimately facilitates you. Use that muscle. Feel it as your reality, and the Creator God will send you options. Also, if you can, avoid polyester.